have lost virtually thousands of texts. Thousands of people from across the country have answered their pleas for help. That includes thousands of first responders from both and over 24 other states and countless Americans from across the country who have donated money, supplies, and traveled to the sites of the devastation to lend their help. I was reminded as I went and saw some of those volunteers in action on Sunday in that region that God doesn't always call the ones that are prepared, but He prepares everyone that He's called. And I saw that in action in glory, full glory, on Sunday as I was walking through that area. Our state is shocked, grieving it in times such as these. Texans pull together. We have proved that time and time again through disaster after disaster, that is actually exactly what the mindset with which we intend to co-chair these proceedings. In today's hearings, in the hearing we will convene in Kerrville next week, and all future hearings I select committee will not armchair quarterback or attempt to assign blame. To do so undermine the very goal in the committee's creation. The goal of our committee is to find constructive policy solutions which will prevent future loss of life like what our state has suffered over the past few weeks. In a tragedy, grace, love, and compassion are essential to healing and recovery. This one is no different, and our ultimate aim is to heal our state's wounds. I ask that each of you bear in mind as we go through about the difficult business of examining the witnesses who will appear today, that next week, and in the future. I also want to explain just a little bit of the protocol. This joint committee does not get to vote on bills. So what we're planning on doing is this hearing and the Kerrville hearing, and then coming back from those two hearings, take what we've learned and what we think would be constructive to move forward on with state items. Each hearing will then, we'll have several bills. I think there's about 4 or so listed on our side. I'm not sure where the House is listed. We'll divide those bills up based on the hearings, and each side will actually have their own hearing to move that legislation back to each chamber through the normal bill process. But this chamber, or this process, does not have the ability, nor should it, to just vote. We need each House and Senate members to debate and deliberate and figure out what they heard and put all the better actors together. So this is not a bill filing or bill voting committee. With that, I want to express my gracious and gratitude being partnered with this guy from my neck of the woods. We have a long history together. I know each other's personalities are a little bit stronger than some people like sometimes, but I think that's a good thing. But I am privileged to be able to handle the co-chair here with Chairman King out of the House, and I'll let him have his opening remarks.
Thank you, Senator Perry. This is going to be a tough series of hearings. It's going to be emotional. And a lot of people want to be heard. I'm hearing from a lot of people from the Kerrville area that wanted to be invited to this hearing. This is not a slight, but as Senator Perry said, when we go to Kerrville next week, we're going to have more opportunities to testify. We're going to have independent hearings going forward. There'll be more opportunity to testify. And nobody is not going to get, we're not going to stop anybody from having a chance to testify, but because it is such an emotional subject and there are a lot of feelings stirred up, we do have to be mindful that decorum has to be followed at all times in all hearings to move forward. So just to go over the rules from the House side as a reminder to the committee and our visitors and witnesses today, same rules of decorum that govern the House proceedings. Under those rules, the chair is responsible for preserving order and decorum during committee meetings, and the chair may ask the Sergeant at Arms to assist in preserving order and decorum. Outbursts or vocal displays of support or opposition from visitors in the audience are prohibited, and the chair may order the Sergeant at Arms to clear the audience if there is a disturbance that disrupts the committee's meetings. Signs, placards, and other objects of similar nature are prohibited. Food and drink are prohibited in the hearing room, and members of the committee and witnesses must confine their remarks to the matter being considered by the committee. Also, if you were on the invited witness list today, Please make sure you visited with committee staff and filled out the witness affirmation form before you testify. Also, for those that want to make a comment today, on the post, on the House posting, there's a link to the public comment portal where you may submit public comment to the committee. And lastly, because we have a small audience room and a lot of people want to be here, there's an overflow room set up in E1026. And if that one fills up, we will also extend overflow to E1014. With that, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm ready to proceed.
Thank you. We will proceed forward on adoption of the rules. Our first order of business is to adopt the committee rules. Senators, your office received an advance copy of the draft rules prior to this morning's hearing, and you have been provided a copy in front of you. There are no substantive differences between the draft rules for our committee and the model rules distributed by the Senate Committee Coordinator during the regular session. If there are any questions about the rule, I'm happy to take them at this time. Chairs, none. Members, Senator Betancourt moves adoption of the committee rules. Are any objections? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. Chairman King.
Our rules are the same as any standing committee in the House, so our rules have already been adopted.
They've been adopted. All right. Thanks, sir. All right, members, we are going to move forward. I came across, as you would suspect, lots and lots of information has flowed into my box, your box, and I'm sure all the members here have gotten lots of helpful, constructive, and probably stuff that will be incorporated throughout the hearing process. One of those pieces was a video of a meteorologist that, after the event, went back and put together the weather pattern that day and how we ended up with what I'm told the technical term, a rain bomb event, and how and where it came from and where we knew it was and where it was going. It was a meteorologist out of Houston. It was probably the clearest indicator of our weather pattern that day. So what I have done is got that video. It is visible up there. The first 11 minutes or so, I think, will set the stage for how the committee can go through the panels with a better perspective of just what this event was. And I'm hearing from the old timers, this is a 500-year plus event when you get into the weeds of just how broad and how big this rain cloud was and what it did. So with that, can you turn the video on?
I'm meteorologist Pat Kaplan here at KHOU in Houston, Texas. It's been a really rough week for folks in the Hill Country and Central Texas, especially the last few days with the prolific flooding that's happened through Kerrville and also in the Austin area. And it's left a lot of folks asking a lot of questions. This is an extreme event. It's a freak event, really. And so I think it's important that we take a minute to kind of break down why it happened, what the factors were that led to it, and what kind of advanced warning those that were in harm's way got leading up to this. So let's just kind of break this down. We're going to start first with why this prolific flooding event happened. And it all has to do with tropical moisture from Tropical Storm Barry. And you might be asking yourself, what tropical storm? We didn't have anything make landfall here in Texas. And that's correct. Tropical Storm Barry formed in the Gulf last week and ended up making landfall in northern Mexico. That moisture then moved up into Texas and interacted with a slow-moving batch of storms over the middle of the state. Those two combined and pretty much happened over one of the worst parts of the state when it comes to flash flooding events, the Hill Country. We have all of these ravines and these creeks and these streams that kind of empty into bigger rivers. And that terrain helps to focus moisture and water all into one spot. When you've got heavy training thunderstorms that occur in these areas, flash flooding becomes a huge problem. So let's take a look at how this kind of panned out on a map. This is the path that Tropical Storm Barry took. It formed in the Bay of Campeche and then kind of drifted into northern Mexico, and again, wasn't an issue for anyone here in the United States in the days leading up to this. Here's the problem, though. Even as the circulation associated with Tropical Storm Barry fell apart, all of that moisture in the atmosphere doesn't just disappear. It's still there. And notice, you've got the Sierra Madre Mountains here through central and northern Mexico, just off the coastline here. When you've got low-level tropical moisture that comes onshore, it has to go somewhere. And it can't go up and over the mountains, and so it starts to stream up north. And so you take all of that tropical moisture from this dissipating storm and you funnel it northward. Now typically this would lead to maybe a couple of days of unsettled weather, more clouds, a couple showers for us here in South Texas. What made this situation unique was the presence of what's known as a mesoscale convective vortex. It's basically a mini area of low pressure, and it was very slow moving, pretty much stationary over central Texas. Now forecasters knew that this MCV, mesoscale convective vortex, was going to be over the area about 12 to 18 hours before this event unfolded. And that'll go to the timeline. We'll talk about that in just a second. But once they saw this feature and they saw the interaction that was happening with that tropical moisture, that's when the first alarm bells started to go off. And again, we'll break down timeline in just a second. But when you marry that tropical moisture with this trigger for the development of thunderstorms, it just unleashed a freak event here across the hill country with slow-moving, localized, prolific, heavy rain-producing thunderstorms, first in the Kerrville area and then the days following up in the Austin area. So let's break down this timeline about what the forecasters knew and how they communicated this information to the public. Thursday afternoon, so July 3rd, just after noon, so 1:18 p.m. Central Time, flood watches were issued, and that did include the Kerrville area. Basically, a flood watch is the National Weather Service's way of saying, hey, conditions are possible for the potential to see flooding. It's not imminent, it's not happening right now, but within the next 24 hours, those conditions may start to develop. Later that evening, as the forecast started to become a little more clear, as more high-resolution model data, which is what forecasters use to develop these forecasts, became more consistent, that's when they put out a special discussion about a flash flooding threat. So the messaging starts to become a little more specific Thursday evening. Now we get into the overnight hours, and just after midnight, so 1 a.m. Friday, July 4th, is when thunderstorms begin to develop right over Kerr County. And that's when the first flash flood warning is issued. This is a warning that is issued for stationary, training, heavy thunderstorms that are producing a tremendous amount of rainfall in a localized area that can lead to the development of rapidly rising floodwaters. 3 hours later, at 4:03 in the morning, that's when that flash flood warning is upgraded to a rare flash flood emergency. Flash flood emergencies are reserved for the most significant types of flash flooding events. This is when there is an imminent, ongoing threat to life and property, and if you don't leave, your life is in danger. And so flash flood warnings are common through the hill country. Flash flood emergencies are that step above. That's a forecaster's way of saying this is a critical situation. 17 minutes later, at 4:20 in the morning, is when the Guadalupe River at Hunt hit that major flood stage, and we know what happens after that. So here's a radar loop. This radar loop goes from 1 o'clock in the morning Friday all the way through Saturday evening. And you can see, notice that little spin, and I'll kind of segment this and break it up. But you see the spin on the radar there? That's the MCV. Again, mesoscale convective vortex. Vortex is that word that really gives us that hint of that spin in the atmosphere. This is like a mini tropical storm almost over land, because we're picking up tropical moisture from the remnants of Barry. You got that spin in the atmosphere, and this just becomes a self-serving engine, basically. And so we see this just persistent rainfall across the hill country for hours and hours and hours. We get a break, more develops here across the Austin area, and then it continues through Saturday and even during the day today on Sunday. Let's hone in on Friday specifically. We go from 1 a.m. all the way through the day. Here comes that swirl in the atmosphere. That's the MCV coming in. But before the MCV actually reaches the hill country, look what's happening over Kerrville. This one little training thunderstorm in here, where it's rounds and rounds and rounds of heavy rain, and then the MCV comes in. It was that initial thunderstorm that prompted the first flash flood warning. And as we kind of pause the clock here, 2:30 in the morning, remember that first flash flood warning came out just after 2 a.m., or actually just after 1 a.m., and this is the reason why. There was one lone thunderstorm right over the north and south fork of the Guadalupe River, and that's what prompted the initial flooding. Then you get the MCV coming in on top of that. Notice the spin there, and that's just kind of enhancing everything, enhancing thunderstorms, enhancing rainfall rates. It was the absolute perfect storm. And the problem that this presents for forecasters on TV, at the government level, in the private sector, across the board, is that this is really pushing the science of meteorology to the limit. We are not at a point yet where we can pinpoint exactly where these thunderstorms are going to pop up and where that flooding is going to happen. But this was pretty much every worst case scenario coming to light. Tropical moisture, an MCV, and the terrain here, again, through the hill country, with all of these little ravines and creeks and streams kind of emptying into one big river. And so the flooding that we got just resulted from just hours and hours of relentless rainfall. So here, again, at the top of the Guadalupe River, so we're not even looking at the middle of the river, where it pretty much begins here, just outside of Kerrville, over a foot of rain fell. These are radar estimates. And this extended up towards Fredericksburg as well. And then when you just compound what happened in the days after, going up towards Marble Falls, Georgetown, look at this, over 20 inches of rain. You got nearly 2 feet of rain just to the south of Brady. So there were different pockets here. Notice these pockets of pink and magenta. This is where flash flooding was the worst. And this is what I was talking about, where the science just isn't there yet. We are not at a point yet where we can identify where these individual pockets that lead to this life-threatening flash flooding can happen until pretty much it's starting to happen. So within about 30 minutes to an hour, the National Weather Service is going to see the trend and they're going to issue the warnings. But those warnings will only come with about 20 to 30 minutes of notice. We can't, it's not at a point yet where we can give you a day's worth of notice to get out of the way of these flooding events. Let's take a deeper dive into the terrain around the hill country and where this happened. So what I've highlighted here is the North Fork of the Guadalupe River. And what you've got, outside of that, highlighted here in blue and white, these are little creeks and streams and tributaries that kind of feed into it. But this is the North Fork of the Guadalupe River. This is the South Fork of the Guadalupe River. And they meet in the town of Hunt. And remember, that flash flood emergency came in at 4:03 in the morning on Friday. And then at 4:20, 17 minutes later, the Guadalupe River here, where the two forks meet at Hunt, reached not minor, not moderate, but major flood stage. So it was just the perfect combination of conditions that led to heavy training thunderstorms over both forks of this major river that goes through the hill country and central Texas. And after that happened, you just got inundated. I mean, this magenta area here indicates that foot to 14 inches of rain that fell. And that rain came down on every creek and stream and tributary that eventually emptied into the Guadalupe River that flowed downstream through Ingram and then eventually into Kerrville. So that's this main river here. This is the Guadalupe River. And so you had all of this rain falling on all of these streams and creeks and tributaries, and that's what led to this catastrophic flooding event. And we're talking about a scale here of a few miles. And again, unfortunately, meteorology just isn't at the point yet where we can identify exactly where these isolated thunderstorms are going to pop up, especially when you come in the middle of the night. Now, looking ahead, what does the forecast for this area look like for recovery operations, for cleanup? As we go through the rest of the overnight, we did have more thunderstorms out across this area today. All of that activity should start to die down. As we get into Monday, there could be more development here. The models are hinting that we could see a couple more showers getting into Monday morning. But I think the heaviest of this starts to push off towards the south and the west. As we go through the afternoon, again, a couple spotty downpours are possible, but it doesn't look like it's going to be quite as widespread in coverage or as heavy as we've seen the last few days. Unfortunately, though, everything is so swollen and saturated from the last few days that it won't take much to exacerbate any rescue efforts and any cleanup efforts. So still another day or so of these spotty down.
I hope that was informative. It was pretty well recapped and kind of how that stuff came together. I don't know that people have heard yet. They did find one of the 3 yesterday, so they're still looking for 2 folks. Some of the stuff I learned when I was there Sunday, it was a 9-mile high rain cloud, basically. At its peak, it was almost 1 million gallons per minute. So that's kind of sets the tone or the pace, I guess, for what we want to talk about. And I will tell you that there's been several people in the know, so to speak, in a Kerrville hearing. We'll have some experts that believe that we can be a little better at predicting where a rain bomb event might actually happen. So be a little more pinpoint of where they think they can put that in. So Kerrville will be pretty informative on where we can move forward on some technology that's not currently in place. With that, members, there'll be no time limits for invited testimony today. Some of the witnesses testifying have elected to provide a presentation to accompany their testimony. Presentation materials will be viewable on the television in this room and on live stream of the proceedings. Hard copies will be provided for each member of the community. As we begin invited testimony, I ask you to reserve your questions until each of the panel has finished their testimony. It's my intent, as well as Chairman King's intent, to recognize members. We will try to alternate between House and Senate, back and forth. So as you light up, I think we actually have to engage your mic to get you on the mic, but we are going to do our best to alternate between members, between the House and Senate, and give everybody equal time on what they want to ask and how they want to ask it. Invited testimonies, first panel, it will be with, Chair calls up Chief Nim Kidd with Texas Division of Emergency Management. Initially, we had a meteorologist scheduled to come in. Chief Kidd is playing interim meteorologist today. Our pick, one of them got COVID, and we went to a second one, and I think that person was unavailable or out of town. So he will do his best, but if you get into the meteorology of it, he has some understanding, but we may reserve that for, and we will add a meteorologist to our initial list for the Kerrville hearing. So, all right, Chief Kidd, state your name herewith, and tell us what you think is pertinent from beginning to end of your tenure. And I know your tenure is not over yet, so.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me grab one of these closer. My name is Nim Kidd. I am Chief of the Texas Division of Emergency Management, and it's an honor to be here with you today. I want to say thank you, Chairman, Senator Flores, Representative Riddell. Thanks for your support over the last several weeks for your district. It's an incredibly difficult situation. My prayers and our actions are with the families of those who lost their lives and the families that lost their livelihoods and their property. Our team is committed to continue our efforts to support until we find all of the missing persons, and the communities have been cleaned up, and they're on the path to rebuild and recovery. And I know we cannot replace the lives that are lost. I grieve for those, the families, and those lives that have been devastated. The sadness and pain for the families to find and the friends of the 136, now 137 fatalities, it will not leave me, and it drives us forward to do a better job. I've been asked to share with you our agency's roles and responsibilities, the timeline of events, a current status update, and some policy recommendations. And if it pleases the chairs, I'd like to start that now. Our role is outlined in Chapter 418 of the Texas Government Code. That government code, the Disaster Act of 1975, governs everything that we do as an agency. It lists the purpose, the roles of the governor, the roles of TDIM, the state finances that support disaster response, local government roles and responsibilities, how mutual aid should work across the state, what we should do as mitigation, what we should do as disaster housing, and what our citizens should do. All disasters in Texas are locally managed. Under Chapter 418, elected mayors and county judges are the emergency management directors for their communities. Our job at the state, as outlined in our statute, is to support local efforts, to augment capacity and capability. I always say we are responsible, but we are not in charge. The responsibility of being in charge rests with local officials. I also chair the Governor's Emergency Management Council. That's a group of 39 state agencies appointed by the governor to support the state and other local government efforts. Our agency has been blessed by you, the legislature, and the governor to have quite a few resources and the authority to pre-position those resources, of which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. Alone, the Texas Division of Emergency Management is just under 550 employees. 300 of them are field-facing. The other 250 support all headquarters-based operations and support our local governments. But with the council, the Emergency Management Council, we are a comprehensive workforce. And with the mutual aid that you've blessed us with in Chapter 418, we bring in specialized groups from other local governments within the state and around the nation. Those local government specialties include urban search and rescue teams, TIFMAS teams, the Fire Interstate Mutual Aid Agreements, the Emergency Medical Task Force, incident support teams and incident support task force, and our faith-based and volunteer organizations active in disaster. We help locals plan, train, exercise, respond, and recover and mitigate from all disasters. But it is only when an incident overwhelms or is suspected to overwhelm a local government are we there to support them. When an incident exceeds a local jurisdiction's capacity and the ability to afford the cost of that disaster, we work with the governor's office for the governor's disaster declaration, and then we do damage assessments. Under federal law and regulations, each state has its own fiscal threshold in order for the president to grant a major disaster declaration. In Texas, because we're the second most populous state in the nation, we have the second highest threshold. The first disaster declaration in Texas was about May 15th of 1953. It was the Waco tornadoes and some floods that followed that. Since then, our state has seen 107 major disaster declarations, 18 federal emergency declarations, and 259 fire-related federal declarations for a total of 384 federal declarations to this state since 1953, far more than any other state in the nation. Our team currently manages $23.5 billion worth of open federal grants from 56 different grant programs and 4,800 individual projects at the local level. Our team works with FEMA and sub-applicants to ensure compliance at the federal and the state level. And at this point, I would like to go ahead and move to the timeline of events, if that pleases the chairs. You all know this. We're a big state. There's always something going on in this state. We have on June 21st, week or so before the storm, we had a team of Texans in the state of New Mexico. Our team managed their emergency operations center for the state of New Mexico over the weekend because they were having fires and catastrophic floods. We have the beautiful ability to have a team that gets to train here and work here and share that experience across the nation and then bring that experience back home to us. We also, as chairs mentioned, we have an in-house team of meteorologists, and they help us work with the 13 National Weather Service weather forecast offices that are in Texas. NWS has 13 offices in Texas, 3 river forecast centers that cover Texas, their Southern Region Home, which coordinates those 16 offices, the Storm Prediction Center, and the National Hurricane Center. So 19 different National Weather Service offices cover our state. On Wednesday, July 2nd, our team added 2 boat squads because the area that we saw may get some additional rain. We sent 1 to Tom Green County and 1 to Kerr County. There was a press release that I'll share with you here in a minute on the 2nd that we were also adding Parks and Wildlife, the Department of Public Safety, TxDOT, the Forest Service, AgriLife, the Public Utility Commission, the Railroad Commission, TCEQ, and DSHS to our teams to be ready to support weather that was coming up. Now, people are going to ask, well, what did you know that nobody else knew? We didn't know anything that nobody. Chairman, thank you for leading this hearing that way, because that is really true. The science is just not there yet. What we did know, we knew we were going into a holiday weekend. We knew that we needed to ensure resources were available from those local governments that we would want to stand up for water teams, for search and rescue teams, for medical teams if they were needed. And we're going to talk in just a second about where they might have been needed. At that time, when we released our press release on July the 2nd, the National Weather Service largest forecast was for San Angelo. And that forecast was likely 2 to 3 inches of rain, less likely, their words, less likely 4 to 5 inches of rain. I'll move to Thursday morning, July 3rd at 8 o'clock. We do a command and general staff, which is our agency's internal call of our assistant chiefs across the region and the divisions. We do this every weekday, just to get us started as an agency on the same page. It lasts usually 12 minutes, maybe 13 minutes from time to time. If there's something going on, they last a little longer. At our 8 o'clock command and general staff call, some forecast models by the National Weather Service had some outliers. The area of concern that we were looking at was 35,000 square miles across Texas. Let me put that in perspective. That's the state of Indiana, or Maine, or Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island combined was the area of operation that we wanted to have resources ready to support our local government partners. That was 44 counties in Texas. The forecast then for those 44 counties in that area was, again, 1 to 3 inches of rain, less likely now 5 to 7. We had a 10 o'clock statewide weather call that morning. We have these calls anytime we think local partners need to be aware of what's happening in their areas and to ensure that all state agency resources on the Emergency Management Council are there to support our local government partners. We had 468 lines call into our 10 o'clock call that morning. And when I say a line call in, it's a Zoom call like many of you do. There may be 5 people on the other end of one of those lines, or there may be 1 person, but 468 individual lines called into our 10 a.m. weather call on briefs on that call for all of our local partners to hear the same brief. Instead of 19 different locations, it's one voice from the National Weather Service, and that's the Southern Region home. The forecast that morning that they presented was slight risk of flash flood. On their scale, it was a level 2 of 4. That was for Central and West Texas. They rated thunderstorms on a scale of 1 to 5 for Northwest Texas. And they rated river flooding, isolated river flooding, minor to moderate in Southwest Texas. The forecast for Friday that they were forecasting in that report was 1 to 1.5 inches of rain with possibly up to 2 inches locally. Because of the size of the area that was impacted, that was when our team started placing resources in New Braunfels, in Llano, in Brownwood, in Kerrville, in Junction, in San Angelo, in Uvalde, in Cameron, in Eden, in Menard, in Kerrville, and Waco, and Alpine, and Austin, and Dallas, and Edinburgh, and El Paso, and Houston, and San Antonio. It was such a large footprint. In order to have any resource close to need, we had to have them scattered across that large area of the state. It was not about the intensity that we saw in the forecast because we didn't see it, just like you didn't see it, just like no TV meteorologist ever broadcast about it. What we saw was a giant swath of Texas. We started calling it a belt, actually, on our internal calls, of where something may happen in the 4th of July weekend. At 11:37, we put out another press release that we were increasing activity in the State Operations Center because of the geographic footprint that we were looking at. National Weather Service forecast was then predicting heavy rains and flash flooding. The theater or area of operation covered West Texas, Central Texas, the Hill Country, and that would last over the next couple of days. Again, over 44 counties, over 35,000 square miles. So we added the additional boat squads, we added the additional helos, and we added the additional high-profile vehicles, a total of 10 of them, to cover a radius of about 160-mile radius across Texas. We had our resources in place by 1 o'clock on Thursday afternoon in those areas. We were pre-positioned, thanks to the authority that you vest in us and the resources that you give us. We had no idea where rain would fall, as you saw in the video, but we knew there was moisture in the atmosphere. Throughout Thursday, the National Weather Service in San Antonio and San Angelo continued to post on their social media pages, and I'm going to read through some of these, and we have the actuals here if you choose to see them. Flash flood watch. I think there's some confusion between a watch, a warning, and an emergency. And I would encourage all of us to go back and look at those actual definitions, because a watch is just be aware. Know that something might happen. But even in their definitions, it says no guarantee of flooding. just a watch. Flash flood watch, 1 to 3 inches likely, 5 less likely. Potential impacts could be rivers, creeks, streams, low-lying flood-prone areas. On Thursday, July 3rd at 3:20 p.m., the National Weather Service San Antonio then says heavy rains possible across some areas of central Texas, especially western hill country, southern Edwards Plateau, and the Rio Grande. Chances of rain decrease on Friday with drier weekend and hotter conditions ahead. 18 minutes later, the Storm Prediction Center says hot and humid for the Midwest. This is the national scale. Hot and humid for the Midwest. Wet and much cooler for the southern U.S. Severe storms and heavy rain, flash flood possible in the upper Midwest and plains, and heavy rain possible in the Northwest Rockies and Florida. No mention from the Storm Prediction Center of any severe weather in Texas. Again, Thursday, 6:56 p.m., the National Weather Service San Antonio says showers increasing across the hill country, west of I-35, from San Antonio to Austin, expanded through this evening. At 7:37, now we're at a flash flood watch still for the hill country, the Edwards Plateau, locally heavy rains possible. Potential over to Highway 90 corridor, southern Edwards Plateau, hill country, expanded to the I-35 corridor. Rains will decrease for Independence Day, but isolated showers may continue. It's 7:37 on the Thursday before, the night before. At 7:58 and again at 8:21, flash flood watch. Watch again, Bexar County, Gillespie Canyon, Kendall, Llano, and advisories for Mason, McCullough, and San Saba. So the area is still continuing to expand, but still at a very, very low intensity level. 8:54 p.m., National Weather Service San Antonio, 1 to 3 inches of rain, 5 to 7 less likely across the flood watch area, 44 counties. The hill country to 281, Bexar, southern Edwards Plateau, and the Rio Grande. 9:30 p.m. on Thursday night, National Weather Service San Antonio, pockets of heavy rain in Kendall County, headed towards Gillespie and Blanco County. 1 to 2 inches have already fallen within the last 3 hours, and more rain is on the way. At 11:17 p.m., National Weather Service San Antonio, pockets of rain continue across the hill country, more development expected through the evening. Flash flood watch remains in effect until 7 a.m. on Friday, July 4th, and their message was turn around, don't drown. Friday, July 4th, 1:06 a.m. National Weather Service San Antonio, very heavy rain, Bandera, Kerr, Gillespie, within the last 2 to 3 inches per hour is the rainfall. At 1:14 a.m., flash flood warning, first warning as you saw in the broadcast also, from Ingram and Hunt until 4:15 a.m. 1 to 2 inches have fallen, expected rate of 2 to 3 inches per hour, 1 to 3 additional inches expected. Flash flood is ongoing or expected was what they put out on their social media accounts. This is 1:14 a.m. At 1:32 a.m., flash flood warning. The flash flood warning that they listed included at that point in time still 13 Texas counties: Bandera, Bexar, Blanco, Burnett, Edwards, Gillespie, Kendall, Kerr, Kinney, Llano, Medina, Real, and Uvalde. 1 to 3 inches of rain likely, 5 to 7 possible across the flood area. 2:37 a.m., flash flood watch expanded until 1 p.m. today now. The hill country again, 1 to 3 inches, 5 to 7 possible. Excessive runoff may result in flooding of low-lying areas, rivers, creeks, and low water crossings. 3:08 a.m., the next message, very dangerous flash flood event, south central Kerr County, 3 to 7 inches of rainfall in the last 2 to 3 hours. Flash flood warning, turn around, don't drown. 3:19 a.m., the Guadalupe at Hunt is at 11 feet. It's expected to crest at 16.6 feet. At 3:33 a.m., flash flood warning, Guadalupe at Hunt, Kerr and Bandera County until 7 a.m. At 4 a.m., the Guadalupe at Hunt, 19.4 feet, expected to crest now at 23.8 feet. Less than an hour, they changed the forecast like that. 4:23 a.m., 5 to 10 inches of rain over the next 3 to 6 hours. This is a flash flood emergency. 4:45 a.m., the National Weather Service at Guadalupe and Hunt puts out another message. And at 5:56, I personally get the first report of people trapped on roofs. We know what happened after that. I want to thank you again for the resources and the capability to expand and put resources in place ahead of need. For this coming week, for this weekend, for the little tropical disturbance that's out there, we are already moving and we'll have resources in East Texas tomorrow. There will be a boat squad up in Amarillo for rain that's coming into Amarillo from a system that's up there, as well as putting resources in Liberty, Beaumont, and Jasper for tropical weather coming in from the Gulf. I'd like to shift to the status now, which is number 3. At the height of our event, we had over 2,700 state employees actively engaged supporting operations across the state of Texas. But that was dwarfed by the 17,800 volunteers that came from all over this nation to help our communities. The governor so far has declared 26 Texas counties for disaster, and we're adding another 4 today. There are 15 counties under the president's public assistance declaration that will help with debris and emergency response costs and rebuilding. And there are 6 counties that we will be adding more today, or requesting more today, for individual assistance to help communities rebuild. We've had over 6,000 people register for FEMA assistance already. As we go forward, we continue to work on search to find those that are missing. We continue to work with the debris contracts and debris contractors because there is a lot of debris to pick up and clean up. And we'll continue to work with our local partners to find solutions for temporary and long-term housing. As we look at the final piece on our policy recommendations, we want to really work with you on volunteer management. As you heard, we had 17,000 volunteers show up. And a lot of those were just good-hearted Texans, good-hearted Americans, bringing their resources, their time and treasure, their heavy equipment, working really hard around the clock for no thanks and no pay. That was most of them. But then there are the others that we really need to keep an eye on as well. So we have an organization that you funded several sessions ago called the Incident Support Task Force, the Disaster Recovery Task Force. We have the capability to, in real time, within the first 12 hours of an incident, the first operational period, set up a volunteer reception center where all volunteers should go, and they should check in, and they should share with us their capabilities and what they're capable to do. Are they unskilled labor? Are they electricians and carpenters? Are they want to help sort clothes, or do they want to search for live and missing victims? The fact of the matter is people come in so quick that we can't control them sometimes, and we don't know who they are. Yet they're going through all of your personal belongings. They're in places that nobody else is supervising or watching them. And I think we should have a deliberate conversation, whether it's here or some point in the future, about making volunteers check in at a location for their safety and for our safety and for their coordination and communication. You may recall that during the time that we were searching, there were several times we had to evacuate the river because of ongoing flooding. When the volunteers check in at a volunteer reception center, they share with us their cell phone number, and they can text a code to us that I can then communicate with them that says, hey, something's coming, get off the river. Or, hey, I need you to check in. The other thing is, once I'm tracking those volunteer hours, we can then use those for in-kind donations from the local community or the state in our FEMA matching grant program. So there's a really good resource and a reason to do this. The next thing I hope we get to have a conversation about is mass fatality management. When an incident happens like it did in Kerr County and overwhelms the local capabilities and the resources, the justices of the peace and the funeral homes, we have an organization that we can bring in to support that. But that organization is really not codified anywhere in statute. And I think we should have a conversation about what the Texas Mortuary Assistance Team can do and what role they can play and what we can do to support our JPs and our MEs and our sheriffs whenever we have an incident that overwhelms those local capabilities. I know we're going to talk about interoperable communications a lot, so I won't talk about it much now, but I will tell you, I went to Kerrville on Friday morning. As soon as I got the text, I went straight there, about an hour and a half drive from my house. And I ran into some of my guys from the San Antonio Fire Department that I worked with back when I was in the field as a lieutenant on the technical rescue team. And I had my radio with me, and I asked to be able to talk to them on theirs. But their San Antonio radio doesn't work in that footprint. So they had some really cheap Chinese radios that they were talking to each other on. We're better than that. We can do better than that, and we need to. We also should have a deliberate conversation about the credentialing of emergency managers at the local level. Today, in Chapter 418, You've heard emergency management directors by statute are mayors and county judges. You will see the words emergency management coordinator listed twice in Chapter 418, only twice. It says the emergency management director may appoint an emergency management coordinator. The emergency management coordinator is an assistant to the director. Period. There's no minimum qualifications to be an emergency management coordinator in the state of Texas. It's whoever the county judge or whoever the mayor appoints. We're better than that. And finally, I'm grateful for your funding and everything that you've given us, but we have a lot of work that we still need to do. Our agency is very small, and I look forward to future conversations about things that we need to continue to support our great state. And Chairman, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
One second. Who, do we have to stay? We have to stay in order because of that. 'Cause- right. Hang on one second, Mr. Verdell, Mr. Martinez, you're up.
Just an admin, we'll try to alternate between Senate and House members as they are on the board, so we'll make sure each is alternated to try to give you guys your voice. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Chief Kidd. First of all, I really want to thank you for all your leadership and your dedication. And I'm honored to not only be a part of your leadership, but also to call you a friend. And I know as a first responder as well, and a lot that we have worked on together, I think one of the things that really, the statement that you made a little while ago was in regard to interoperability and the ability to be able to speak between different agencies. And I can relate because I understand that down in the Rio Grande Valley, we have a major incident, whether it's a mass casualty incident or unified response to where various agencies get together and then you switch over to all valley and everybody can communicate. But once we leave the valley, our radios no longer work. And in regard to interoperability and being able to utilize those radios and that communication, is there a way that utilizing the infrastructure we already have in place and maybe having a radio with a SIM card that we can pop in and that radio will be capable if we go to Dallas for response, and like we have our Texas Task Force 3 down in the Rio Grande Valley. And then also my hats off to all of our responders that went out there and took their time and during that response. But is there a way that would work to where we're not building a new system, but working off the existing system and have the ability to provide grants for radios to where all of these other agencies would have that capability?
So, Chairman, thank you. And again, thanks for your support and partnership and your service as well. I believe the short answer to your question is yes. But I also personally believe we have two challenges when it comes to interoperable communication. And the first one is the technical challenge. It's what you just discussed. And I think the private sector partners that we've talked to and dealt with over the years are ready to come to the technical solutions. In many places, those technical solutions may already exist. I believe the larger challenge in today's date is the cultural challenge. We have 52 to 54 independently, usually locally owned radio systems across the state. There's no state standard for governance in how they operate. We do have, and the Department of Public Safety can talk well about it, great organization that has the statewide interoperability coordinator. But I think when you talk to them, you're going to find there's no teeth and there's no funding, there's no carrot or no stick in what we want to get them to do so that we have a statewide covered network. Now, I'm not suggesting we go build a brand new system from the ground up. I don't. I think there's plenty of broadband, fiber, technology, capabilities, Starlink, you name it out there. But we do need an organizational structure to cobble that together and offer grants and offer support to locals that have built these systems on their own. We didn't give them any money to do that. They built them on their own. And if I'm building my house and you're not paying for it, you don't get to design my house or say what rooms I have. And that's what they've done with their radio systems. So we as a state, I believe, should have conversations deliberately with them and figure out how we can integrate all of them in together.
And then just one more question in regard to that, Chief, and the response from a lot of our agencies that went over, Texas Task Force 3 to all of these agencies, do they have the equipment that is necessary to respond, or is that something we also need to look at so that they could be well prepared for any type of response across the state of Texas?
Thank you, sir. With the exception, I believe, of some of the TIFMAS apparatus that you fund through the Texas A&M Forest Service, when a local government sends their resources, their people and their equipment to us, those are generally owned and operated at the expense of the local government. We only pay for them for the time that we're using them. And we should have a deliberate conversation about the resources that we stage across the state. Because as you know, and for the rest and those in the audience, 2/3 of every paid fire department is off duty at any given time. The 24-hour shift that they work, Houston, 3/4 of theirs is off duty at any given time. What they don't have is 2/3 of fire trucks sitting in their fleet ready to go out the door. If it was a decision that we added some state-owned assets across the state in our regions, and maybe if we had some great places to park them and stage them and store them at the same time, then it's much easier for those fire chiefs to send me their employees and not send me their frontline apparatus. And I hope that we can have a conversation about that.
Senator Bencourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nim, as usual, you go through with precise declaration of how we got there, and I think the meteorology of this is so unique. It really is reflected in the warning levels, because basically what you laid out, and I'd love to see that, by the way, if one of the clerks can bring that up to the front. I'd love to see this again. You're basically saying that at 106, we're still at from the National Weather Service, we're still at a watch level. Really, when you read through what you had outlined, we didn't get to a warning level of significant dangerous flooding until 3:08, if I've got the right round.
That's our information,
Yeah,
Senator.
right, and then there's a backup at 3:14, okay? And then really, the flash flood emergency comes out at 4:45. So the,
423 was what I had here.
423,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
that's fine, right. And so really, those three are the three step-up levels that you're dealing with. And by the time we get to the third level, the flash flood warning emergency comes out, it's already happened. When did you get your first call that people were on rooftops and they needed help?
4:56 a.m.
Yeah, so within literally 33 minutes from that flash flood, that final emergency warning, you're already getting people that need to be rescued. So this is an amazingly compressed schedule, okay, that you have to respond to, and that the responders in the field are having to respond to, because we're not even going from 0 to 60, we're going from 0 to 200 miles an hour in 3 hours and 17 minutes. So we're really going to have an extended discussion, Mr. Chairman, members, with the National Weather Service about these type of alerts and the speed at which they came out. Now, given that radar loop, they might have been able to accelerate it some, but they're not going to accelerate it by half a day or 4 hours. It's not possible with the meteorology that we're dealing with, level of technology we've got. Now, I'm really interested in taking this, once you got that call and you're driving to Kerrville and it's an hour and a half, what are you doing at that point? We've given you a lot of autonomy, but I'm really curious about who do you have to call to get more authority? We've got the Senate Pro Tem who is the chair here, he's third in line. And in the next 16 months, you're going to be calling him at some point in time. That's my prediction, because Texas is too big and there's got too many possibilities of natural disaster. So, when do you have to call the governor for more authority? In this case, I know the governor was out of the state, so when do you have to call lieutenant governor? And take us through that portion, because I think the lieutenant governor got his first call after 9 a.m.
Yes, sir. So I think I understand the question, and the way Chapter 418 reads today, if I'm pre-deploying state assets or local governments, that's not contractual. I don't have to go out for bid on that. Those are mutual aid resources that are outlined in Chapter 418. I've been blessed with the authority and the autonomy to take action to save lives.
And you did. And by the way, if you hadn't us pre-positioned where you were, even though you're covering a ridiculously large area by national standards,
Yes, sir.
You wouldn't have had your assets in the right place.
And historically, I've been in this spot for 15 years, first by Governor Perry and then by Governor Abbott. And the direction that I was given 15 years ago was, Nim, don't worry about getting a call from me asking why you spent money or deployed resources.
Okay.
You do not want the call asking why you did not. And I've operated that way for the last 15 years, Senator, I am the expert in this, and I challenge all of our people to be the experts in their jobs. And so there's nothing that requires me to notify anybody else of the actions that were taken during the emergency. Here's the statutory authority I need from the governor or acting governor. It's a disaster declaration. And then it's the request to the president for a major disaster declaration. Remember, under Chapter 418, only a mayor or a county judge can mandate an evacuation from a part of their community. The governor of Texas or acting governor does not have the authority under state law to mandate an evacuation. So there's, and please, I mean no disrespect to the governor, the governor's office, or the acting governor, whoever that may be. But in times like this, when we're in the middle of the battle, they have already granted the permission to me to take the action that we need to do our job. And you have enforced that through regulation and funding.
And then we had a chance to talk, and I can't remember what day it was. I think I caught up with you that by the time you got to Kerrville, you actually ran into two EOCs
Yes,
that
sir.
were operating independently. One was in the city, and the other one was in the county. So
Yes,
what
sir.
action did you take at that point in time?
So we see this a lot across Texas, not just in Kerr counties, 254 counties, 1,217 now cities, but really only about 480 emergency management programs across the state, because in so many jurisdictions, especially in the western Texas, Senator, in your district, the county judge is the emergency management director and coordinator and everything else at the same time. They don't have the staff to continue to go and do that. But in some of the more rural areas, or I'm sorry, more urban areas, you may have a county that has 3 or 4 of the cities under their emergency management plan and under their emergency management coordinator. You also have places where the emergency management director, the judge, appoints an emergency management coordinator, but that emergency management coordinator may be the employee of another department in the county. And there are plenty of times whenever a city will have its own emergency operations center, the city of Houston,
Sure.
and Harris County will have its own
Transtar.
emergency operations center
Right.
at Transtar. So in events like this, when we see that none of those facilities will support all of the resources that are coming in, we encourage them to move to an ad hoc facility quickly that we can get everyone in the same room so that we're looking at each other eyeball to eyeball and not having to chase each other around rooms or around communities. And so we did. We asked them, and they complied very well. They were, again, we're not in charge. We don't get to tell them what to do. We're just responsible. We support them. We asked them, can you find us a facility that we can all be in the same room? Because we have a lot of state and federal, soon-to-be federal assets coming in. And I would like for us all to be in the same facility, and that's when they offered up the youth center there.
Which is quite a challenge in the area that you were looking at, okay, right? To find one of a substantial nature to handle all the resources that you were bringing in. I want to loop back with this, and for the members here, I think it's a very important point. Basically, you besides pre-positioning, and then once you're involved in this, you've got there's a constraint which only a mayor and a county can order evacuation. Now, by the time you're driving, if that evacuation hadn't been ordered at that point in time, it's probably too late, just due to the magnitude of what was coming, hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of flood per second coming down the river. Now, I think one of the things that we have to look at is we probably have to know when these mandatory evacuations are ordered, and we have to have some way to bring that bottom-up decision up to the top, because whether it's the pro tem or lieutenant governor or the governor, That's something we're going to have to understand, that we've already had this issue. Those evac orders are in place, because otherwise, the state at the higher level doesn't even understand exactly how much of an emergency actually occurs. Am I missing that?
Senator, you're not missing anything. I think the other thing that I want to say is local officials know their communities better than anyone else. And I don't think we would ever want to take the mandatory or the ability to mandate an evacuation away from a local official any more than I think we ought to give it to somebody that's in Austin several hundred miles away from where that problem or that challenge is. And so I think there will be a lot of question, a lot of accusation, a lot of second guessing. I'm not in that business. I don't do that. But those local officials know when to order an evacuation and when not to. And I think at the hearing that you're going to have next week sometime, you'll probably get some of those local officials that will tell you why they made the decisions they made or why they didn't make the decisions they made, and they need to be the ones to answer those, sir.
Right, and I think that it's important that those, and regardless of that decision, when it's made, there also has to be a reporting structure that people can understand that it's occurred, and that whoever is in the chair above you, okay, has to know what's happened already on the ground as quickly as possible, because we do have a distributed system. But I don't think we reported up as fast as we could have in that situation. I think it's important that if you're really looking at what you need, and that's the other side of this coin, you really need a disaster declaration as soon as you can get one, effectively. That's your next big switch from state government, from the leadership of state government. And then obviously you need a federal one as well.
Yes, sir, and that state disaster declaration, when granted by the governor on the front end of an event, allows me to exercise extraordinary measure and buy things budget for.
Because that's the key thing.
Yes, sir.
Because you can pre-position all your existing assets, but you're going to have to start buying things immediately.
Or if I have to contract for debris cleanup or contract for porta potties or things like that.
Right,
Yes,
and
sir.
I want to get to one more point and then yield my time, because we've got many people that could be asking questions. We had a discussion, because one of my interests was looking at a, flood emergency communication and river warning system. And you made the comment, and I agreed, that this, as good as TDM is, and measurably, I believe it's the best in the country.
Thank you.
And I think that your other colleagues would agree. You can't be the one that hits that button that says, we've got an evacuation order, or that we need to do that alert, because the granularity of these decisions is down to the local level. And you were literally trying to look at 33,000 square miles to begin with to figure out where to position your assets. So I just wanted to repeat that conversation that we had between the two of us, that you don't think your organization is the proper place to be able to have that authority, that it has to stay at the local level.
Yes, sir.
Now, my last question would be, is there a backup level at some point in time for, whether it's the pro tem, the lieutenant governor, or the governor, to be able to intercede?
You would then be required to change state law also to mandate
I
the
know that.
evacuation, which today does not. I mean, we can recommend, we can support, we can bring resources in to help effectuate that, but I think, let me see if I can rephrase how I understand the question. Do we need a better system for warning? Yes.
Yes.
What does that look like? I don't know. But I know you've got a bunch of people coming up behind me that are experts in that and can answer that question for you. That's the first part of it. The second part is once we have this amazing system, who should have the authority to implement or actuate the system? I still believe that should be local officials.
Right.
Your next question is, should there be a backup to that? And that answer is yes also.
Well, that's the essential question, and that's really, Mr. Chairman, what I know what Senate Bill 2 is effectively about. But I appreciate the work that your department does, because it is superior by any definition I
Representative
understand.
Burdell.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Chairman King. Chief Kidd, I just wanted to, I know I've told you this in private, but I want to say it publicly. We first met July 4th on that morning, and I just want to give you public credit for how well you were organized, how quickly y'all had a central EOC established, and watching you over several days through that process. how well your agency integrated with the other agencies during search and rescue and recovery. And I want to give you public credit for that. I do have one other question for you, which is when y'all are monitoring the weather that occurs, do you have a central website or location where you can see all that data, or are there multiple websites that y'all are having to review?
So, great question, Representative. And because the state and the nation looks to the National Weather Service, that is the public-facing weather document that we primarily look at and gauge what we think others will see in that. That's part one. Part two is we have multiple private sector weather services that our team uses in addition to the products from the National Weather Service. One of those tools for storm prediction is a private sector group out of the Friendswood area there, and they give us a very scientific forecast for tropical storms, much different than what the National Weather Service puts out. So our team of expert meteorologists does actually look at all of those that are out there to see what the public is seeing so that we can help try to gauge what public action may be, as well as take the resources and position them in places that we feel we need to be ready to support local partners.
Yep. Thanks, sir. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Mendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Kidd, I'm always going to call you Chief Kidd. That's how I met you. And thank you for your work. Thank you for your testimony. If you will, I also want to agree with my friend and colleague, Senator Bencourt. Could you provide us that timeline that you?
Yes, sir.
I was doing my best to follow it. Chief, so from my notes on the timeline of events, on July 2nd, you sent out 2 boat squads. On July 3rd, you had a command call in the morning. Is that correct, with the 44 counties because of the 35,000 square mile area that looked like it might be affected? Was that correct?
So every weekday at 8 a.m. we have
Okay.
our team's command and general staff call that just talks about what's going on across the state and what our folks are doing. That was the 8 o'clock call.
So this was on the 3rd, on July 3rd, but what prompted sending the 2 boat squads out on the 2nd?
National Weather Service San Angelo was then saying 3 to 5 inches of rain.
Okay, so you were kind of aware that something was coming, you needed to be prepared, right?
Yes, sir.
Then I think you have 11:37, you're working to distribute resources by 1 p.m. July 3rd in a 100-mile radius, was that correct?
160 miles, yes, sir.
160-mile radius, okay. So in that 160-mile radius, how many counties are in that 160-mile radius? How many emergency operation coordinators were you dealing with?
2 different questions. The number of counties, I believe, is in the 40 to 44 counties.
40?
Yes, sir. That's that 35,000 square miles
Yeah,
that
let's
we were
say
looking at.
44,
Yes,
okay.
sir. And then each county has an emergency management director, that's the county judge.
Right.
And then some of those counties have independent coordinators.
Correct.
And then if those counties have a city, and as you know, a lot of our West Texas may have 1 or 2 incorporated city limits, unlike Bexar County with 30-plus inside it.
Right, right.
So each of those, and our job is to share information with them. The 10 o'clock call that we had 460-plus lines calling into that call. We believe the majority of those were from the impacted areas, forecasted areas.
So my question is, does the current process or procedure, because as you've correctly stated, locally, they have to make the decisions at the local level, but they also need to have all of the best information. And I'm going to venture to guess that you have probably access to all of the best information in terms of, you have at your disposal. Do you have a process in place that guarantees that you have communicated the potential danger with each of those emergency coordinators at the local level? Do you have a way that you can for lack of a better word, authenticate that they have received the information?
So we know we can share the information with the technology that we have, but we really have no way of knowing whether they received the message.
See, I would better hope that you'd have a way for them to acknowledge, I have read and received what has been sent to me, because I think that would be the best way to guarantee, regardless, we need to put a procedure in place that tries to eliminate human error. We can't guarantee the competency. You mentioned it in a way, you said emergency coordinators' qualifications, there are no qualifications. It's an assistant, basically, to the mayor or judge. They can appoint somebody, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's it. There's one sentence and there's no qualifications whatsoever, right?
Yes, sir.
That's a concern.
And Senator, that doesn't mean we don't have qualified people in those jobs.
I didn't say that.
know.
I didn't say that.
Well, I'll get beat up from my peers because
Yeah,
I
no.
didn't say that, so.
Yeah, I didn't,
Verifying.
I agree, but we trust, but we must verify.
Yes, sir.
I think, as I look at the timeline and I share, it's evident that, and this is where it gets a little cloudy for me. You had something at 1:06. What happened at 1:06 a.m. on the 4th of July? You had 1:06, then you had 1:14.
Yes, sir. 106 National Weather Service San Antonio put a social media post out that said very heavy rain for Bandera, Kerr, and Gillespie County, rate of 2 to 3 inches per hour.
Okay, so at that time, they're saying at 1:06, they're saying, hey, there's heavy rain, it's coming down at a high rate. And when that happens, does anybody, other than, you have to be aware of the social media posts, you have to be watching, is there anybody that's, their job is to follow this no matter what time of day or night this is?
So in Austin, at the State Emergency Operations Center, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there are 3 to 5 humans that are watching what's happening across the state. Their job is to be the alarm bell for the rest of us.
And they work for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So you have that, that's what I was hoping. At that point, do they make a concerted effort to communicate that, to make sure that the people in that area, in that where that flooding is occurring, do they know this is happening? Do they communicate that, and do they receive, are they acknowledged that they received that information?
There is no system in place today to ensure that County Judge X or Mayor Y or Emergency Manager Z
Right.
is getting the same information that we are getting from the National Weather Service.
You do see the problem with that, right?
Senator, I do, and I'll share more of the problem and the frustration that we've had over the years is we've had a form called the DEM, the Division of Emergency Management, Form 147.
Right.
Under the governor's executive order from 2019, mayors and county judges are required to tell us their contact information and who's responsible for emergency management at the local level. To this day, I still get forms sent to us that have an office number for the emergency contact number. Listen, it's not for lack of trying and reaching out. We still get email addresses that we know are generic email addresses that are not being monitored. You've given us the resources to put people in the field to work directly. We have an employee in Kerr County, have had for 2 or 3 years now. That doesn't mean we have any way of guaranteeing that the responsible adult local officials and those that are appointed are awake and seeing the same information that our people that are paid to be awake at 2 o'clock in the morning are seeing.
Yeah.
Just lost power.
So, 1:14, what happened at 1:14 a.m.? You had it on your timeline.
Yes, sir. At 1:14 a.m., the National Weather Service San Antonio issued the flash flood warning for Ingram and Hunt, and that flash flood warning was in effect until 4:15 a.m.
So that's when it changed in those 8 minutes from watch to warning?
That's what it looks like from their social media post, yes, sir.
Okay. And I understand that one of the problems that I see is that these terms, I think it's just like the alarms we get on our phones. They may be easy to ignore, especially at 1 o'clock in the morning when most reasonable human beings are sleeping. But the problem is that when emergencies like this are occurring, our constituents statewide rely on us to have people awake. I want to thank you for bringing this forward because I think this helps highlight where we can get better. I think that I'm sure that in Kirk County, when at 1:06 a.m. they were saying that the water was coming down at how many inches per minute?
2 to 3.
2 to 3 inches an hour. So it's flood. It's already the change from watch to warning is occurring because of the waterfall. The only difference is someone hasn't actually determined it, called it something. that at that point, hopefully, what I think we need to say, and maybe working, do we know how many inches per hour will create a flooding situation? Do we know that we have that information?
So globally, yes, meteorologists do. They use something called the flash flood guidance, FFG, but it's different depending on, and Senator, this is where I'm playing meteorologist, so cut me a little bit of slack here. It depends on the terrain and the geography. In some cases, 1 to 1.5 inches per hour will cause massive flooding. In other cases, it's going to soak into the ground, and farmers and ranchers are going to welcome that rain. So each part of the state is different based on the catchment basin.
Right, if you're flat, yeah. So in this part of the country where it's known as Flash Flood Alley, do we have a historic knowledge of how many inches per hour cause a flood?
I believe what the Weather Service will tell you is 1.5 to 2 inches per hour can cause flooding in certain areas.
And how much was
really,
falling?
we should
how
get
much
them
was
to
it?
answer
Well,
that
how much was falling at 106?
2 to 3 inches per hour.
So twice as much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Darrell.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, Chief, thank you for all that you do. We were privileged to have a briefing with you and the governor last week in San Angelo. Chairman Perry and I were present. My thanks go to you for all your organizational skills that resulted in great relief for the city of San Angelo and our area. I also want to thank you for your proactive response by deploying a swift water rescue team to San Angelo on the basis of a 3 to 5 inch forecast. Now, San Angelo, we don't get 3 to 5 inches in 6 months, but you were able to deploy a swift water rescue team to San Angelo, and after we got 14 inches in 12 hours, you were plucking people out of trees and off rooftops with that unit. I can't thank you enough for your actions and your prepositioning those assets to our area during that period of time. I do have one question with regard to disaster scams. I have noticed, as we all have, opportunities to donate and help these various areas of our state. Is there anything regarding credentialing or certification of these sites for authenticity and recommendations, if you will, that they are created and able to execute, if you will, the deployment of donated sums on behalf of these areas? So my query is there anything in your experience or what you're doing now that helps position TDM or any other agency to kind of be a filter, if you will, for these sites that open up that pretend to help but may in fact be scams?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, and thanks for the compliments and the question. On the compliments side, we did have a boat there, but that was to support your great local first responders that were already there, already engaged, and already doing rescues as well. Nobody does this alone, and our job is to support them. And we did a small portion compared to the large portion that your local first responders did, paid and volunteer. To the second part of the question and the comment is, we do in our agency have the ability to set up a volunteer reception center. We're going to call it VRC because we love acronyms. To set up a volunteer reception center within the first couple of hours of an incident. And this is where we want, and probably would love to see some teeth in this, we want our volunteers to go to the VRC first. That way we can qualify and quantify them as well to make sure that we have the right people doing the right job at the right place. And listen, I don't know that we want to talk about this right now, but I'd also like to know, do we have any registered sex offenders that are coming in to work in shelters? Do we have anybody with warrants right now that shouldn't be going through my personal belongings that are scattered all over the place? Do we have any predators? there that but we also know that the others are out there. So I need your help in balancing that out. The second part of the question that I think for our answer is, you have helped us fund the Incident Support Task Force, the Disaster Recovery Task Force over the years. That's the group that sets up the Volunteer Reception Center. That's also the group that meets with your community foundations like our team did yesterday in Kerr County. Because you're going to get so many of these volunteer groups that come in and say, I'm here to help you clean, but I'm going to need about $10,000 so that I can continue to fund my capabilities. And frankly, I think they become predators to the disaster at that point. And we need to find a way to call them out and get them out of the area. And I think working together with our team and our law enforcement partners at the local and the state level, we can help identify those. I know that there have been families that have been called by these predators saying, I have your kid, I have your family member. It's despicable, needs to stop. I've got a place for them.
Well, thank you,
Yes.
Chief.
Senator Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, we go back a long way,
Yes, sir.
and we've handled small events, big events, and I understand your role very well. And Texas, I mirror my colleague, Representative Verdell, and saying thank you on behalf of our constituents for your rapid response, the great work that you have done, and the people that you have managed to get the work done. Texas is very blessed with you, and how you work with our locals, who, yes, we agree, they're the ones on the ground. They're the first ones there and the last ones to leave, but so are you. And unfortunately, Texas, being as big as it is, you're very well honed in handling disasters, from wildfires to floods to hurricanes, tornadoes. So where I'm going with this is that your function in Division of Emergency Management is emergency management. So that's to be able to provide, do you agree that the first role is to be able to provide for a uniformity of a basic response to any of those types of disasters, which this committee is looking at, a baseline, and then you have specific operational parameters. But what's real important is that everyone, every county working in concert with you, every state agency, every law enforcement agency has that basic emergency management baseline to work off of. So when we respond anywhere in our 254 counties, that is established. Things like we're talking about, specific issues that I've been hearing this morning so far about, was this person notified? Those are all things that can be, that are already in place, as I understand them, may not be practiced, but do you agree that that's something that's very important to come out as a standardization of that basic baseline, using, for example, the incident command system, which came from the fire service for firemen, but it's been used in everyone who's in this business is trained in incident command. And for example, the coordinators, especially coordinators in the county, shall be trained in incident command, because that's the basic I'm talking about. That's the baseline of emergency management. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
So how would you think you would help us to go around to make it so?
So, Senator, I don't remember the exact year that you got into law enforcement, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that in the 60s, did T-Cole exist?
No, but neither did I. Actually, I did in 1960. I was in 1960, but I don't think I cared much about it then.
But T-Cole didn't exist before the 60s. I think it was in the early 70s whenever this body, your predecessors, came together to standardize and credential law enforcement.
That's correct.
1993, I was the first class in the San Antonio Fire Department in 93 that had to take a state test to be a paid firefighter for the city. Didn't mean everybody before me couldn't do the job. They just only took a city test. They didn't take a state test. Today, to be a paramedic in the state of Texas, you have to take a national registry test. All of the emergency management and emergency response disciplines have gone through this process except the emergency management discipline, to where we standardize the curriculum in order to be paid or volunteer even as an emergency management coordinator for a jurisdiction in Texas. I think this is the time that we do that. And again, not because we have people that are unqualified doing the job, but to your point, Senator, there is no standardization and no consistency. Today in Texas, every peace officer has to pass the TCOL exam in order to do it. Every firefighter has to pass written and practical tests from the Commission on Fire Protection. Every EMT and paramedic passes the class of the institution that taught them, as well as the National Registry test before they can practice medicine and touch a patient under a physician's license. But to be an emergency manager, you need a signature. That needs to change.
And that's the point I'm trying to make this morning with you is, as in my experience, of course I took incident command before incident command was cool. I took it in San Antonio, and then since then required all the game wardens under my command that I had. Everyone has it, everyone. But because we wanted to be uniform in our response with TDEM and all the agencies that TDEM coordinated with. But that baseline is so important when you're responding to these emergencies. To Senator Betancourt mentioned, sometimes you'll have silos, and I understand that. That's what the locals do. They're responding in their fashion that they see fit. But when you come in together, having a baseline to start with that you already know, it's like a machine. It's like riding a bike. It's like what we did with Alert with peace officers for active shooters, where every peace officer takes Alert so they have that baseline of response. Yes. I guess I would like to see that, Mr. Chairman, and members, is something for us as something that's very critical, no matter what the disaster is that we're responding to in this state, that baseline exists right off the bat, like automatically, everyone. And then we go into the specificity of operations. It's different in West Texas for responses to floods. The wildfires in the Panhandle are different. The floods in East Texas are different. Hurricanes, tornadoes. But what's not different is the structure, the basic structure of a response using incident command. And I think that's something I wanted to stress this morning. And thank you for your leadership in making that something that was uniformly applied, as I understand it, in DPS and all the other state agencies that respond with you. The other thing I would like to bring up, if you would bear with me, I know after every event, yes, you're always going to have people say you should have done this and you should have done that, and that's going to happen. But when the reality of it is, your situation, what you do, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you respond to an event, no matter what it is, using the training, equipment, and resources that you have at the time, using the information you have at the time. You respond. Then after it's over, you do an after-action report on anything, large or small, and you ask yourself what worked and what didn't work. What did we do well? What did we not do so well? So I know you haven't had time to thoroughly do that for this event. But if you would if I can ask you to, if you may, and if you're not comfortable, please don't. But say one of the top two things that you say that you would believe were some of the lessons you learned from the event in the Hill, this flooding event in the Hill Country, which 8 of my 13 counties were affected, and thank you for the work that you've done in every one of them. What would be, just at the top of your head, say, this is a couple of the important lessons that I learned from this that perhaps we can do, re-examine, or this is what we did very well. Could you elaborate that to us, please?
Yes, sir, I will, and thank you for that. And you are right, the National Incident Management System, NIMS, I was NIM first before they named it NIMS, and the Incident Command System are the backbone of how we respond. And the Department of Public Safety, Parks and Wildlife, TxDOT, all of the state agencies that respond together have that basic training. And we offer all of those courses out to our local government partners. It's just really not a great system to continuously track who has and who has not, especially with turnover, to your point. We need to do better at that. The next thing you mentioned was after-action reports. AARs is what you're going to hear them referred to. And listen, you can't open an after-action report anywhere in this nation and not have communications as the number one or number two thing that needs to be improved upon. And that is operable and interoperable communications. It's the way we talk to the media. It's the way we talk to the public. It's not just telephone to telephone or radio to radio. It's all communications, which sometimes waters it down and makes it hard for us to fix. The thing that we have not done that I need help with is corrective action plans. Because to your point, in an AAR, we come up with what did we do right that we want to sustain? What can we do better that we need to improve? And then we usually set timelines for implementation. But remember, for my agency, in the FY26, the upcoming budget, 70% of my revenue is a federal dollar that is dedicated to somebody or something else. I have very few discretionary funds. I would love to have conversations about how we hire people whose sole purpose is to support our local government partners, not just in their actions, but in their corrective action plans. Because you go find any of your first responders and ask them if they've done an AAR, and they're going to say yes. You ask them about a corrective action plan, they'll go, yeah, I think we did one of those. You ask them if they've implemented it, most of them are going to give you the shrug. We don't know. And that's why we keep having these failures of the same thing over and over again. We as a state are better than that, and we can do better, but we need a sincere focus on corrective action plans. You asked about the top two things for this event. I'm going to tell you communications is one of them. That's messaging from the media, that's messaging to the citizen, and that's messaging back and forth with our local first responders that are coming from all over the state. We have a long way to go on improving our communications. The next thing is, and I know y'all are going to look at this, we've got to do a better job at our warning and notification systems for all hazards, not just floods.
Thank you. I just have one more thing to ask you. On communications, yes, I agree totally on the interoperability. It's something that we've struggled with since 9/11.
Yes, sir.
I remember I used to have two radios in my car, one for the county, one for the state, and then sometimes that didn't work, you know, and that didn't have enough towers. Then we were required to change the towers, but it's been the fiscal note on that has been very prohibitive. But then again, it's like with the issue with water, Mr. Chairman. I mean, when you run out of it, then you'll pay just about anything to have it. And here in interoperability, the security of our communities, the security of our state and our nation, it's critical that we have that. So we have to look at it. Which brings me to the 911 system. When people use, does 911 also fall on emergency management?
No, sir.
Well, but as I understood, people will call 911. I'm an emergency, I have an emergency. But when you have little small counties like Kerr, it'll be overwhelmed quickly. And then it switches and it goes to Bandera, and Bandera's overwhelmed quickly. Then it switches and it goes to Guadalupe because it's not in the same system as Bear, which is nearby. And so that's also something we probably need to look at is how do our citizens call in for an emergency, and that type of system, is it something to look at as well. So with that, there's a lot of other questions I could ask, but for the time, we'll get to that. Thank you very much, and God bless you for what you do and all the folks that you work with. We're very blessed to have you. You're the best in the world.
Thank you. Have a great team. Thank you.
It's great questions, members. I know we've got multiple panels today, and some of the communication stuff will be rehashed at a different level, different detail, different purpose. It's an important discussion, but we'll keep moving here. Senator Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I want to thank you, Chief Kidd, for your leadership. And thankfully, we are not a state that requires another state to come in with leadership to get us through a disaster. Thank you for being that good. As I watched through this, and Senator Flores and I were in Kerr County, and then I was in New Braunfels, obviously, but I saw TDM act with excellence. Excellence in research, in resource deployment, in rapid response, in real-time leadership, and being proactive and not just reactive. So thank you for your testimony. Thank you for the recommendations. They're right on target, and I think many of us, we have other questions, but the way your pre-preparation paid off, and thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your testimony. I want to drill down into a couple of things and maybe ask your team for some follow-up information so that I don't take up too much time here today. But first of all, for the other folks testifying, if you could please follow the concrete policy solutions like Chief Kidd laid out here. And the way that I think about disaster scenarios and the way we thought are different than this one, but some similar issues that we ran into. But you looked at the before, during, and after. What are the things that we can do policy-wise that can mitigate or eliminate the potential for loss of life, loss of property, tragedy, suffering? And so I heard you in your breakdown, right? There's some issues around volunteers, mass casualty events, and how we can involve external resources when local resources are overwhelmed, communication, credentialing of folks, and also I think communication interoperability kind of goes all together. So those in my mind fit nicely into those buckets, and some into multiple buckets, right? Before, during, after. I'm going back to the beginning of your testimony, and this is some of the information it would be helpful for me to see. You mentioned, and I think I got the number right, that you oversee $23.5 billion in federal grant funds?
Yes, sir. The disaster portfolio of 56 open disasters right now that are going to local government partners, those 56 open disasters total $23.5 billion worth of funds, some of those dating back to Hurricane Ike.
Okay, and so those are the ongoing, where money has come down for post-disaster
Yes, sir.
recovery, and you all manage those along with local partners.
We are the grantee from the federal government. The governor is the grantee. I am what's called the GAR, the governor's authorized representative.
Got it.
And as the GAR, our team makes sure that the local governments are following all local, state, and federal guidelines for how that money is spent. Yes, sir.
And that is all in disaster recovery. So that's all in the after portion of a disaster.
That is, but that's not all of the disaster recovery. That's just the disaster recovery in our agency. You have the General Land Office and
Yes.
other state agencies that also get federal dollars to pass through after a disaster.
Well, and so I guess my question in there is, and I know other agencies are gonna have dollars flow down as well. In terms of what you look at, is there anything in those? I understand you're recovering in those sites. Are some of those dollars being utilized in any way to look at preventative measures going forward? Is that part of the recovery that those dollars go to? And this is something we don't have to drill down into every single one because obviously you're managing a lot here. But if that's some kind of breakdown, I can understand, because I think what people like to. When you go through a tragedy like this, and you talked about it, right? You want to learn from, and Senator Flores hinted on this, right? I've been out with the folks at Fort Bliss and doing show you how they do after action reports when they go through their exercises. Important, because when they're in the real field, like that's they need to know how to do things the best they can, right? But so this is our opportunity to understand. And so when you're utilizing those funds, are those opportunities existing to use those funds for those preventative measures going forward, right? The before. Here's what happened here now. Are those funds at the federal level that come down to y'all utilized in those buckets as well?
Some are, and I can explain, and I'll try to be succinct about this. So
Sure.
under the FEMA Public Assistance Program, we call it PA. That's the money that goes to state agencies, local governments, and certain nonprofits to rebuild or repair what was damaged in the PA program. That's a 75-25 split, usually 75% of the money from FEMA through us down to that sub-applicant. If during the time of that rebuilding or that repair, there is an opportunity to do additional mitigation, that's the word that FEMA uses, and FEMA will approve that for the right benefit cost analysis, that structure, that facility can be improved, not just rebuilt to the way that it was. That's part one. Part two is FEMA has a program called the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, referred to HMGP. HMGP is generally identified 1 year, 12 months after the beginning of the disaster. Historically, that has been 15% of whatever the federal share was of the public assistance damage. Tracking so far? So for every $1 million in damage, I get $150,000 in new money to go do mitigating efforts in different places that were not impacted by the disaster. Could be the same community, but remember in the PA program, I can do mitigation. This new money will do places in the jurisdiction or in other jurisdictions to fix problems that have been identified. Historically, that mitigation money does not all get spent across the nation, not just in Texas, but across the nation. There are multiple reasons for that. One is it's a 75-25 split. Most of the jurisdictions that have just experienced the disaster do not have the financial resources to go and build what they want to fix because they're building what has been damaged in the inventory and repaired.
Sure.
There is no state fund for hazard mitigation in Texas that I'm aware of, and certainly not one that runs through our agency.
So let me drill down into that, because this is where I was trying to get to, is this is the space where the weight and the heft, the power of the state of Texas can help, right?
Yes, sir.
We've heard from some of these communities that are struggling, suffering. You just mentioned right now, when they're going through this, they're just trying to get back to where they were. They're trying to get back to zero. They're not trying to figure out how to prevent the future. This is the 8th largest economy in the world. And if we don't have, and maybe we'll look into, but if you're saying you don't know of any state bucket of funding to help in that regard, I don't know why we're not doing that, right? Over the last decade, you can look at, and you mentioned these are disasters across the board, freezes, major heat events, floods, wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, all of them have hit. If you've been in the legislature for the last 5 or 6 years, you've seen all of those come through. And so these are the opportunities that I want to grasp onto, because I know we only have the 30 days now, but this work is not going to stop between now and when we come back in 27. This is going to be one of the key things we do in 27. At least that's my opinion. And I think it should be. I think probably people share that opinion. But those are the types of opportunities we need to look at, because I don't want to look into no one should want to look into the eyes of any of these folks that are struggling to figure out how to rebuild and not then offer them that leg up to say, here's how we can make sure this isn't as bad in the future, or we can mitigate or eliminate the possibility this can happen in the future. That's what's powerful about the state of Texas, because we can do that. These smaller cities and counties, they don't have that. We can leverage that because we have the ability as the state. So that's the challenge that's in front of us. But this is a really, this is the time to get in front of these things. So I appreciate that, and that's a really good point you made.
Thanks, sir. And I don't want to mislead anyone that the legislature does not fund projects at the local level, because that's true. You do. But there is, to my knowledge, no coordinated mitigating fund for multiple communities to sign into the same project. And this is why the FEMA flood mitigation program and the hazard mitigation program isn't really that successful. Because the way the program was designed, it's to the individual jurisdictions. It's very difficult to get the taxpayers in Harris County that are impacted by the flood to flood mitigation efforts 200 miles upstream that caused the flood. We're better than that, folks. We've got to find a way to do this together.
You said that multiple times as you've gone through your testimony. We're better than that. And that's the one thing, I'm probably remember a lot of things as we go through this experience together. Those words are going to ring in my head throughout this. We are better than this. We've lost a lot in this, and it could have been better both before, during, and after. And we know that. And that's not a blame game.
No.
That's accountability. And that's okay. That's what we're here to do. Thank you, sir.
Senator Blanco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Kidd had an opportunity many, unfortunately, opportunities to work with you and your team. You all are excellent, always prepared and always present, so thank you for that. I want to drill in a little more on the questions that Senator Flores did a great job of asking as it relates to community readiness. It's said that disasters start locally and end locally, and you yourself have said that they are in charge, the locals are in charge. correct me if I'm wrong, but under current law, only counties with populations of 500,000 or more are required to ensure their EMCs complete the TDEM approved course. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, the 3 hours.
3 hours. So as someone who represents several rural communities, since these emergency management coordinators are appointed, do you believe that that threshold, that population threshold under current law limits broader preparedness efforts? And what do you need, what does TDEM need from this legislature to expand that access to training across all counties, and should they be required?
So, Senator, thank you. And yes, I say it certainly discourages smaller jurisdictions from doing it when we have the standard or the bar that only those communities with more than 500,000 people do. I do believe in, and the other thing is, in the very rural counties where the county judge can't afford through their budget to appoint a coordinator, then now we're requiring that county judge to go through that training. But listen, after Katrina and Rita and Ike, I think we will go back to either the 07 or the 09 legislature. There was a push to make county judges go through training. But if you actually read the statute, it's the county judge or the sheriff or the person responsible. There's no ands in it, and there's no teeth in it. There's nothing, even in the legislation, there's nothing that says, if you don't do this, this is what happens. And so this is where I think, yes, sir, I would love to have conversations publicly or with your staff about what should it look like. I got a feeling we're going to come up with the same answer, and I got a feeling it's not going to be what we see today.
Great. We'll look forward to working with you on that. My last question relates to the focus again on local operations planning and oversight. Are local governments currently required, either by statute or by administrative rule, to regularly review and update their disaster response or emergency operations plans? And if so, is there a standard timeline or is there an updated cycle for that?
Yes, sir, great technical question. So the current standard is at a minimum, once every 5 years, that jurisdiction submits that back to the state, and we look at that and make sure that it complies with the FEMA guidelines, Community Preparedness Guidelines, CPG 101, which is the national standard. There is also requirements that the locals should at least review internally their plans at least once a year. And the once a year review, I think, is great. The 5-year review, man, we probably should take a closer look at that. I can tell you, with 1,471 jurisdictions required to submit plans, that's well over 10,000 planning documents that our team needs to review and look at to ensure compliance. That will require additional staffing at some point.
So you'll need the staffing, and so are there state-issued guidelines and best practices to assist these local jurisdictions? I think you had mentioned it right now, but just to make sure that
yes, sir,
that's accurate.
And Senator, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I go a step further. Not only state, but federal guidelines. Listen, we do want federal standards as it relates to emergency management. Now, we're Texas, by God, so we still want to do things our way. But to Senator Flores' point, the National Incident Management System is the baseline, so that when we're going to other states, or like in this event, we had 26 states send people to Texas. I want when they come here, they have the same standard of training at the minimum level that ours do. So,
sounds like we can just fix that with some legislation. So thank you. Look
with a caveat to that. The same way that we got that notification from the National Weather Service?
It goes to them as well?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. But there was no coordination between the state and the local at that time regarding that communication and essentially waking the judge up or the next in line at the local level?
I would see that a little different because we had a San Antonio Fire Department boat squad in Kerrville the day before at Thursday at 1 o'clock that was already tied into the local responders there. So to say that there was no coordination between the state and the locals, that's not accurate. There was coordination. There were resources in place that they knew the resources were there. And when you get to Kerrville and you listen to the Kerrville fire chief, I bet he's going to tell you the story about how that saved at least 3 of his firefighters' lives because we had that boat squad there.
At the local level, the individual that could initiate the evacuation is the emergency management director, the county judge, correct?
For the unincorporated area of the county, yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. So a sheriff can't do it,
No,
or
sir.
the next in line, right? We had the same issue with Ebola, whether it was, a quarantine, whether it was the governor, the commissioner, Department of State Health Services, the CDC director, Judge Jenkins, the emergency management director, the emergency management coordinator, the sheriff, or the police chief of Dallas County. And they were all, you remember that?
I do, yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
it's not dissimilar regarding stay in place versus evacuate, and the need for that coordination and communication. Were you yourself able to reach, or any of your subordinates reach the county judge in Kerr County on your drive down to Kerr County?
On the drive down to Kerr County, I do not recall trying to reach the mayor or the judge. I was more interested in communicating with the responders that were in the field.
Okay. But the individuals that needed to be saved needed to have a warning system activated to some extent, or at least some sort of messaging system. I'm not for sure how they do it at the county level. I'm sure we'll hear more next week. But that judge's level, from my understanding, from what I'm being educated on today. And so the most important person to know that and to save the most lives, we can have sirens up and down, but if someone doesn't turn them on, they're no good, right? And so that communication to the person making the call, not dissimilar in the time of war, in this time of emergency, needs to happen. And so there seems to be a disconnect of making sure the person making the call is awake, alert, and doing it. Am I wrong in
No,
in
Senator,
my concern there?
You're not wrong. I think there's complicating factors, or it's a word I want to find. When an emergency